Here in the UK very recently we had something called a budget, and this is where the Chancellor tells everybody which taxes they're going to reduce and which taxes they're going to increase, and maybe which taxes they're just going to get rid of, and possibly which taxes they're going to invent out the blue. And this is a thoroughly boring process. It's one of the most boring processes that is possibly imaginable for a human being to endure in their lifetime. Fuel duty is going up by 0.01%. Duty on wine is being reduced by 0.01%. National insurance is going up by 1p. Corporation tax is going down by 2%. And apparently all these details are the end of the world. This is something for everybody to immediately grab all their toys and start chucking them out the pram instantly every time the Chancellor mentions some statistic that they're going to change. And the news cycle for weeks on end is people interviewing other people and telling them how the economy is going to collapse in the next 2 seconds if the Chancellor does this or doesn't do that. And you have to watch people become red in the face and thoroughly excited and outraged, and it's like Jekyll and Hyde. Some people, you know, you're just having a normal conversation, and as soon as tax comes in, suddenly you get a 10-hour rant from the depths of their soul about some minor aspect of financial bookkeeping. And I suppose it does speak to the very essence of the human soul, really, and that I suppose nobody does like being taxed. I mean, it's fairly obvious, really, isn't it? This is your money, now I'm going to take a chunk of that. It just, by default, it seems like, you know, your initial response should just be, well, I'd rather you didn't. I guess you could say it's common sense, really. But then these very same people, they will get as equally animated if you then say, oh God, I drove over this awful pothole the other day, nearly wrecked my car. And then you'll get an equally long, hideous rant about how they're paying all this tax and they can't even sort out the potholes. And the two don't go hand in hand, funnily enough. You can't have it both ways. You can't have your cake and eat it. You can't rant about changes in taxation and then rant about the fact that there's not enough taxation to fix the potholes. There has to be one or the other, really. You can't perform a 10-hour rant about taxation and then perform another 10-hour rant about how the waiting lists at the hospital are going up, or having to sit in A&E for hours on end. You can't really have a 10-hour rant about taxation and then have another 10-hour rant about why we need all these immigrants to pay tax to pay for pensions. There's a fairly straightforward sum involved where the state needs a certain amount of money to fulfil the services that the state is required to provide. In order to do that, it needs to tax a certain amount of money. And at some point, some people are going to have to pay tax in order to pay for that. But of course, it's the age-old dilemma that nobody wants it to be them. It's the age-old game, isn't it? It's probably the oldest game in the world. Figuring out what's taxed and then trying to base your entire life around things that don't involve being taxed. And you see that with companies. Companies don't want to be taxed, so they stick their head office in whichever country offers the lowest tax rate. And so you end up with the head offices of Google in somewhere like Ireland or Luxembourg. And farmers, they don't want to be taxed because there's long family held farms that have existed for time immemorial, and it would be nasty to tax them out of existence. But then by doing so, you just mean that every person who becomes rich then buys a farm for the sole purposes of tax avoidance, and it completely misses the point of why farms pay less tax. And then you have the absurdities of expenses, and how you end up with that scenario we had many years ago where MPs were all being told off for putting absurd things on their expenses for their taxes, like duck ponds, and it's a tax write-off. Things that can be tax write-offs Some people dictate their entire life as essentially one big tax avoidance scheme. On their deathbed, on their gravestone, it'll just be, yeah, I did a pretty good job of avoiding tax all my life. I was happy as a result. They moved to Barbados and then flew into work every day on a jumbo jet, commuting via jumbo jet every day so that they could put their jumbo jet travel onto their expenses as work travel, and everything they do in the country where they're working can be put down as an expense because they're having to travel such a long way to come and work. And they don't pay any tax on where they live because they're living on a tropical island in the middle of nowhere. And the only thing they pay is, I don't know, maybe some income tax and national insurance, which maybe they don't even pay that. I don't know, who knows? They figured it all out. You know, this works down to sort of like every little citizen in the country, and you'll just be talking to somebody and they're really excited about the fact that they can put their shoes on their expenses because in the job they do, their shoes are counted as workwear in some way that isn't personal choice clothing. But they're allowed to, it's not provided by the company, but they can buy their own shoes and then put them on their expenses, and that doesn't count towards their income tax at the end of the year. The thing is that the more people look for the loopholes and successfully, manipulate the system to their own benefit, the more complex and varied the tax system gets to try and get everybody in the net. It's like flies on a spider's web. The more they struggle, the more they get entwined with all these constant different bizarre taxations that come out the woodwork from nowhere, to the point where the system is so riddled with bizarre and unexpected moments of taxation that it's almost impossible to run a company without having to employ an accountant to figure it all out for you, or employ some software that needs updating every 2 months at a cost of £5 billion per update. And you end up in this weird sort of circular loop of paying more and more money to a tax avoidance expert in order to avoid marginally more tax. A sort of sub-tax to avoid tax. Your anti-tax tax. And, I'm probably sounding like somebody who's a bit too pro-tax. There's something a bit inhuman about me being so pro-tax. Why would any human being be pro-tax when everybody is anti-tax? Even the people who implement the taxes, they're all doing dodgy tax deals on the side, and the very people who are performing the duties of imposing the taxes are probably running a million tax scams in the background. But no, I'm not really pro-tax. I'm more anti-mess, really. I think the system is just so messy now. I'm not somebody who rants about tax. I'm somebody who rants about people who rant about tax because they're making everything complicated for everybody else. We're in a situation now where our taxes effectively have taxes on the taxes of the taxes. You go to work to earn money, and from your payments at work they take tax, obviously, your old income tax. And in the UK and probably some other countries we have national insurance as well that comes out of our wages. So that's one dose of tax. But then you pay taxes again when you go down the shop and buy something. I don't know. Example, I don't know, a food blender maybe. Does anyone need a food blender? I don't know. If you do, you're paying tax on it. You're paying the VAT. Because of course the customer pays the VAT. The businesses just have to keep records of all this VAT because they're paying VAT on the blender they bought from the wholesaler, and the wholesaler pays VAT on where it got it from, and it all goes down the line, and eventually the customer pays this extra VAT on top. And then of course to get to work you've got to buy your car, which means paying VAT or sales tax, whatever your country has on that vehicle, and then as you use it you're paying tax on the petrol to keep it running, and then you pay road tax to, I don't even know what road tax pays for anymore. That used to be the thing that did the potholes did it? I don't know. Who knows? And then the company you're working for, or you bought your goods for, when they make a profit, they've got to pay tax on that profit. And so your wages are already coming out of pre-taxed money. And then if you manage to put away a bit of money every month, if you manage to save some money, then they tax you on the interest of that, because that's now classed as income. And everywhere you look, really, it's sort of like tax on tax on tax on tax, and there's all this tax everywhere. But at the end of the day, you still have to be paid, you have to have enough money in your bank to live your life. And if you don't, you end up with social incohesion. And this is why I personally don't bother ranting about tax, because at the end of the day, what you're being paid is generally going to be what you need to live on. And for the majority of people, all this tax flying around in the background and all these other places is pretty irrelevant, really. The only thing that matters to you is how much money you actually end up with at the end of the day, at the end of the month, and what you can buy with that. And so as a general civilian who just performs work for companies through their life, it's kind of irrelevant. A few years ago, the Liberals said that they would solve the country's problems by putting 1p on income tax, or 1% or whatever it was. I think it'd be 1%. Income tax is in percentages, isn't it? So the 1p is effectively 1%, because it's the 20% or whatever it is income taxes means 20p in the pound, which is another thing. The whole terminology is just really confusing as well. Two ways of saying the same thing. So for each pound you earn, a certain percentage gets taxed after a certain threshold of earnings. And for most people on the planet, most people on the country, 1 extra % on your income tax is nice, kind of neither here nor there. It's not a big deal. It's not something to get excited about, really. But some people get fanatically excited about this. They think any form of income tax is bad, even though there's going to, some people think they should get rid of income tax, I don't know. But it won't change anything. If they got rid of income tax, you would have more money briefly until all the prices went up again. And then the amount of money you have at the end of the month is just sort of magically about what you need to survive. All the costs and taxes in the background have just moved around a bit. It hasn't affected you in the slightest. But for some people, a politician saying that they won't be doing all this stupid faffing around so much, they'll just stick an extra penny on the income tax, and they go mad. They go insane. My God, don't vote for them. They're going to put up income tax. 1 hour lecture and madness. And oh, it makes no sense at all, really, does it? 1 penny in the pound. What does that work out as? Let me have a think here. I'll bring up the calculator here. Wait a minute. Let's say £2,500 minus 20%. £500. Yeah. So yeah, if your gross pay is £2,500, at 20% you pay £500 in tax. So now let's increase that from 20 to 21%. That's £25 a month more. And bear in mind, it wouldn't even be that, because you get a certain amount before the taxation kicks in, don't you? You're allowed to earn like 12 grand a year before they even start taking taxes. So it's less than 25 quid a month. Why is that something to get all red-faced and angry about? Why is a politician suggesting that any worse than a politician suggesting they put, I don't know, 20% tax on sugar, something that everybody consumes in some way at some point in their life? Why is that any different than putting up the price of petrol, or all these billions of other things they do in the background to get the tax via awkward means? And I suppose the difference is that all these awkward things that they do in the background that aren't income tax, they're all avoidable by some means, whereas income tax is less avoidable. In the sense you're not having the fun of playing the avoidance game if it's income tax. These people are probably actually paying more tax by playing this whole getting away from income tax, because all the taxes are so hidden that you'd struggle to figure out what they all are on your own. Whereas your income tax, you just look at it on your pay slip and you can be angry about it. I don't think anybody's life would be radically different with 1p extra on income tax. And yet it's the 1p extra on income tax that everybody gets so excited about, that the Chancellor can't possibly do. How dare they do that? And oh, it's the tax and spend government, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I'll go into this further in a different video. Just talking about this weird part of human nature, really, where people can't see the wood for the trees, or they'd rather wander around in the woods than just sit by the trees. I suppose that's a better analogy.